led by Tim Jorgensen. Okay, item 7 is public comments. Are there any cards? Okay, no cards. Item 8 is our report section. 8.1 AATA representative. Okay, not present. Item 8.2 CSEA representative. Not present. 8.3 student representative.
She's here.
Alright. Okay. Sorry, I know I haven't been here in a little bit. Softball, public softball. Anyways, so to start out at Meadowlark, the 4th graders took a trip to Rancho, forgive me if I say it wrong, Camulos, I think, in Fillmore, so they could learn more about California and what life was like back in the day. Students rotated around learning centers and did fun activities like wash clothes on an old-fashioned washboard, make bricks, adobe bricks by hand, and learn about what it was like to go to school in the 1930s. It was a great hands-on experience and all the students learned something new and had a great time. At High Desert, Mr. Spielman was recognized for his passion for science education and was presented a state gold coin, which I know Mr. Sparks also was presented one during my class. Mrs. Millar was recognized and given a state gold coin also for her unwavering commitment to the Dancing Feet program. Saturday, March 23rd was the spring handbell concert. We were taking on an international adventure with harmonic bronze and Mr. King showcasing his trumpet skills, and he actually did an incredible job, I must say. It was awesome. Lastly, the middle school basketball began, and our Hawks are improving every day with a mix of wins and losses. Lastly, at Vasquez, softball season is in full swing, and the girls are hopefully practicing on the brand new field finally next week, and we're all incredibly excited and so grateful of how hard everyone's been pushing for us to be on this field, so thank you for whoever's been helping. Also, I'd like to report that the Young Americans went extremely well. I've only heard good things come out of it, and students who would have never thought they would have done it are so grateful to have done it. Like, they're like, oh, I want to go into performing arts now, so truly, it was great. And then most importantly, VHS had its every 15 minutes program yesterday and today. I was lucky enough to be a part of the experience myself and go with the students throughout the whole journey for your book to take photos. From the scene itself to the courtroom to even the bonding activities at the hotel, where Mr. Jorgensen made me bawl my eyes out. The entire event was highly successful and created a huge impact on both the students a part of it and the overall junior and senior classes. In simple words, it was heart-wrenching and unforgettable. That's all I got.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. Construction report, Mr. King.
Sure. So, I don't have my glasses tonight, so I'll try.
You want them?
No, that's okay. It's got a good distance check. So in they call it a back check, which has to do with the DSA closeout items. So all that means is that they're submitting all the items, they're all closed out. John Tegmeyer is working with DSA to get that last document that says you're closed out on all the items that are at the school and you have the green light to move forward. So as soon as we have that document, we can do the fence work. Regarding the softball field, and Alyssa, you guys have been so patient and I appreciate it. If you can help with the messaging though, to let the team know that if it's not ready next week, it's not because the district doesn't want you to play on the field. It's because the second we say it's okay to play on the field, that means we've accepted total responsibility for the field from the architects, from the construction company, from United Construction. Right now, we can tell them, hey, the ground isn't quite level, the grass isn't coming in right. So now we're just making sure that the grass is coming in, and as far as the concession stand, the last piece there is the stucco finish. So they need to put on a second coat. That doesn't affect you folks on the field. You can still play on the field even if the concession stand isn't ready. but we wanna make sure that that grass is really just taken well. That's the main last piece, and
So
then,
that means there's some, chance that the kids won't necessarily be on it next week, and that's what you're trying to.
exactly, I
We're
don't
gonna do our best, but it's gotta be
Okay.
right.
I don't ever wanna say 100% at this point, because then it gives false hopes to you and your team, and that's not fair. So I'd rather just have a little bit of caution there, just so,
Just in case.
yeah, exactly, because it's not fair to promise something that you can't deliver on, especially to students.
It's to deliver the best field to them and the one that's not gonna cause you guys
Yeah.
problems and interruptions later.
Exactly, exactly.
So,
And
so,
then-
so the interior, the part of the field that they're gonna be playing on is fine, right?
Except for
That
the
part's
base.
been taken care of, it's the exterior on the
That-
outside of the
Yeah,
softball
I'm just getting
field.
to that, so the bases too, we had to order, when they built the interior, they didn't put in you would know this better than me, Tim, but the metal pieces that hold the bases,
The base anchors, they didn't put them in?
something with that,
Yeah.
so they have to make sure that those are installed, and then we ordered the bases just in the last couple days. So, for whatever reason, that stuff wasn't done before, it's being done now.
Okay.
Let's see.
Did
Okay,
they,
so-
are they ordering it, or did we order the equipment they're gonna install? Is that, it's part of
We
the
ordered the
package?
equipment they're gonna install. It just says here bases are not accounted for. So I know that, but I know that I signed off on something that Yolanda gave me for bases. So they're ordered. So, that is for the construction
Okay,
plan.
how about, 8.05 superintendent safety report?
So, sure, yeah, the slideshow, yeah. There were apologize, the pictures are kind of heavy duty, but it's part of the impact of every 15 minutes. So let me go through the safety report, but these are some of the pictures from the scene. The Vasquez video production class is working on an Alice train video for student training. We're working with the Antelope Valley Emergency Coalition and the Antelope Valley School Emergency Council. Alyssa's right, every 15 minutes was remarkable. I showed up to this scene yesterday and all the students were lined up, the seniors were lined up. Were those seniors and juniors, Alyssa?
Yes.
Okay, they were lined up and you could have a pin drop. They were so attentive and captivated and emotionally struck by the scene. I was talking to fire department and law enforcement, and they do such a surreal, authentic job of this that if this doesn't make an impact on both adults and students, then I don't know what does, because it was just such a surreal scene. And Mr. Andrus, I commend him, he did some improvisational work, so they had, he was mic'd, so the students could hear Mr. Andrus's voice. So for example, he would say, "Hey, Miss Simonian, this is Mr. Andrus, come in. Okay, we just found out that student A is deceased in the car. Can you send me the contact information for the parents, because I need to make this difficult phone call." And it sounded authentic. He actually got choked up. He and I talked about it afterwards. I got choked up as I heard the siren even from the coroner's ambulance. It's a very impactful scene. And then today I was over there at 10 o'clock, 10:15 with the student group, and I spoke for a couple minutes and had to leave, but parents were there coming in crying, students were coming in crying today at the assembly, because they do a whole debriefing piece before they return to the gymnasium. And I remember doing that with my daughter Brittany, and it's tough on parents. So, great job. And I'm gonna do something with the ASB class just to commend all of you for your efforts. So excellent work.
Mr. King, just a quick comment on every 15 minutes. I think it's a great program because it's something that really affects our society, drunk driving. And you know, any drinker deserves a DUI if you're gonna go by .08 pretty much. That's just a couple of drinks. And so I'm not being judgmental of people, but out of 43,000 people a year that die in car accidents, 27,000 are caused by drunk drivers. That's more than half. And that's 73 people a day, each day, that in the US get killed by drunk drivers, killed. For every person killed, I'm sure there's about 4 or 5 that are permanently hurt. It's just a very important thing to society to protect our society from. I think starting at a teenage level, you know, I was impacted. I graduated in '89, 30 years ago now, and I was impacted myself because they were doing programs like this at Vasquez High School, and they're very effective. So any effort that you put into that could directly save lives, and I fully embrace this program. I think it's a good thing, whatever you do with it.
I'd also like to comment, I want to give like a big thank you to Mr. Jorgensen for coming out there.
That's really
He
awesome.
did a special like bonding activity with the group, and at first we were like all tired. We weren't taking it seriously. We're like, oh, we have to go in here. Hopefully it'll take like 20 minutes. We're so tired. And then we all got in there, and I was sitting in the back, and just one by one as he talked to them, like one person starts breaking down, another person starts breaking down. It was so emotional, and like his activity that he did seriously like hit everyone so hard. It impacted the students. Like afterwards we were all just bawling our eyes out, hugging each other like it's okay, you're not alone, we're all here together. And it was, I can't express how that experience was. It was emotionally draining but so impactful to every student.
That's awesome.
So thank you. Thank you.
Is that, okay, thank you.
Can I
And,
say something? I write it down, I'll write this out.
do a yellow card?
I got a yellow card.
Okay, is it regarding this program?
Regarding this program.
Okay,
Just-
well, we often have speakers speak either at the general public comment section or the part associated with their topic. So since this is the topic, go ahead, speak now.
You are all speaking about the students and how they reacted and all that. There's another part to this. The parents also get involved. Well, my girlfriend had to write a letter to her daughter on how much she misses, what the effect is of losing her daughter. So it's a parents also get involved in it. I had a friend that has lost a child to drunk driving, and she has gotten into it every 15 minutes, and she tells the kids what it's like for her to have lost a child. So it's just not the kids, which I think is fantastic, but it's also the parents get a reality check also. Just, I think that's important.
No, I appreciate it, Ms. Holland, and my wife and I were, we had to do that exercise when Brittany died during it at Bonita, and the law enforcement showed up to Timmy's classroom, pulled her out of the classroom, and gave her the information that your daughter passed away, and then Timmy had to contact me at work, so yeah, it's definitely a surreal experience, and thank you for bringing that to our attention, that the parents are certainly impacted. And that concludes our report.
Okay. Let's see, that is the safety report. How about superintendent report? Anything more general on 8.06?
We have a little bit there. Let me go through a few things now, and we'll show that. Just reminding the public of our board's dedication to governance and their own professional growth. If you don't know, they attended modules 1 and 2 of Masters in Governance. They're attending modules 3 and 4 on April 12th and 13th. And modules 3 and 4 are school finance and human resources / collective bargaining. So these are full days, 8-hour sessions each day on those topics. In addition to that, they're also coming here on Saturday, April 6th. So I just want to comment publicly for the record that this is a highly committed board to the betterment of our district, and I so appreciate our board's efforts on that regard. The softball field dedication is May 11th, just as a reminder to everyone. We'd like to do let the board know we're going to do a second sort of rededication on a much smaller scale. So the ribbon cutting on May 11th, nice dedication to Larry Layton, but the family, because his wife operates a pet cleaning business, on Saturdays is their biggest business day, the family works it. So we couldn't change the May 11th date, and I had a conversation with Alana Layton, the granddaughter, and we're going to, one of the softball games, kind of do another rededication for the family so they can all be present. And they were very appreciative, and I'm just gonna pass their gratitude on to the board.
That'll be in the afternoon.
Yes.
After school.
Yeah.
What's the date,
May 11th is the Saturday for the big one, for the ribbon cutting, and then we'll let you know the date of the ball game where the family will be present. I just want to share, Dee Holland had made a request to the district to look into volunteers assisting on projects. So the Fair Labor Standards Act does allow and recognize the benefit of volunteers working on projects. The biggest thing for the school district, I think as you know by now, I think we had some conversation with Ms. David, but the biggest thing for us to be careful of is that we don't take work away from classified bargaining unit members, and that those bargaining unit members may not be volunteers on a project because they would otherwise be paid for that as a regular duty, if it was part of their normal duties and responsibilities. And the last piece is, we have a video for you. I saw Ms. Van Ornen walk in, and we previewed this video yesterday, and I think you'll enjoy it. It's a Dr. Seuss video, and I didn't figure this out till 3/4 of the way through the video, but the song is a Dr. Seuss book. And it's a beautiful song, so anyhow, we'll show you that now. Ms. Jensen asked for a photograph, and we'll give you a whole video. And I will tell you while Yolanda's pulling it up, the video is 5 minutes, and I'll just encourage everybody, just try not to be anxious for the rest of the board meeting and just enjoy the 5 minutes. It was well worth it. When I watched it, I just thought, really beautiful pictures of the students, and yes.
Yeah, thank you.
If you want, we can come back to it.
Try the third option down, play with VOC.
You want to come up, Ms. Van Ornen?
Did you say to do? Sorry. Oh, they're right there, yeah.
Or go open it or do VOC. Oh, it's got an update on it.
Sorry, folks.
We do rehearse these earlier and
We
it popped
said
up
that.
and it just
It was-
never failed and it was beautiful.
What can't go wrong?
Technology's a blessing
They're
and a
gonna do
curse.
VOC.
When you wanted it, well.
Ms. Van Ornen, you want to come up and
Feel free.
Well, it's like the other.
Our
ones
DVD.
running in
Oh,
the
it's on
background.
the
There
corner.
it is up there.
There it is, you're
Put
good.
it down there.
Oh, we need sound for this.
And it's embarrassing, the rhyming I do, by the way, which isn't very long, so.
Hang on, we'll get back.
Straight out of Rancho Cucamonga.
Yeah, the rhyming is sad, so don't judge that.
You have to.
It is very fun.
Remain humble. The rabbit felt mighty, important that day, on top of the hill, in the sun where he lay. He felt so important up there on that hill, that he started in bragging, as animals will, from the big brag.
With brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes.
All right, okay, good, so that's 8.07, we'll come back to 8.6, folks. Okay, board member comments, we'll start with nothing for you, Mr. Porter, okay, Mr. Jorgensen?
Yes, I have. I want to comment on the, congratulate Vasquez ASB. They asked me to participate to help them with their retreat exercises. And there's a closing evolution at the event at the end of the night after all the Highway Patrol was there and the experience was there, and they talked and they all, and I chased them out, and then Kaylee and Kayla and I went in the room, we got prepared, and there was 24 participants, and every one of them worked very, very hard. And I made the task very challenging and very difficult for me and for them. I draw into play the fact of their relationship with their parents and choices they make with their students, their boyfriends, girlfriends. I had a ride home, it was my only ride. We walked through a full scenario of excuses and reasons that young people make the bad decision to get in a car with somebody who's been drinking or drinking themselves. I told them at the initial outset that it was probably going to take about 45 minutes, and they were working so exceptionally hard, it went for an hour and 27 minutes. And at the end of the night, I was tired, they were tired, because they had all worked very, very hard. So I've always been a believer in the 50, and I've done 3 of them at Vasquez before this. This is my 4th one. And I know that it has a significant impact on our students, and I was remarking to the superintendent that I don't know how large schools can do what we do. At our small school, we can touch every single student because we have enough, and the volume is there that we can get the message out. It was always good. When I was younger, we didn't have this, but fortunately for me, my parents ran an ambulance company, and so I had to go on ambulance calls with drunk driving. My dad said, "Get up, you're going on this call before we get our license." That was his way of doing the same thing. So in the way we do it now, I think commending to us that we always support this every other year, and the students, the ASB, Mrs. Owens, and all the students, they worked very, very hard for this program, and it was an exceptional one. I'm anxious to see the final video. It was difficult and challenging, but they all worked very hard with it. So I'm pleased to be a part of that. It was always meaningful, and the kids did a great job.
The video is intense. It's on YouTube if anybody wants to watch it. Just search Vasquez High School every 15 minutes and it should come up.
Mr. Oliver?
I had a nice visit with the Acton Town Council between this meeting and the last one. Thank you, Jackie. I visited Mr. Spielman and gave him my 2nd gold coin. I enjoyed my time in his classroom, and unbeknownst to me, they had arranged a visit where all of the students, or most of them, had my temperament, and I still did fine because I'm more than all of them combined in my methods. But what I did tell them was that Mr. Spielman is someone that will instill a seed of something in you that will grow into something that you can measure in your career later. And I encouraged them, I asked them if there was one teacher that they could remember in their educational career, and believe it or not, there were several examples of teachers that the kids enjoyed actually, and were able to say, that teacher has made a difference in my life. So I encourage them to go back to those teachers and have a moment with them and tell them, you know, that you have impacted my life. Because when you get old, like Tim here, you can't always go back and find the teacher and either apologize for being disruptive to their class or to tell them that, you know what, you are responsible for this, baby.
Scary.
Oh, I see, Lee Jennings is here. Softball, Alyssa, I love you. I love your style, gentle pressure applied relentlessly. I use that myself at work, but we can't void the warranty, so they've got to be held to it, and we don't want to make them feel like we're desperate to give them more money than they deserve. So thank you for your patience, and please message that out. I went to the Young Americans thing. That was incredible. I went to the Harmonic Bronze thing, and what I was really enjoyed about Harmonic Bronze is they actually had parents and community members up there playing, and they actually did really well. And so that program has gone from a select few where everything has to be perfect to it's including the community. And I'm also seeing the High Desert Sports Program taking off and doing well. Behind all this, where my brain works is, I think there are students in this district who will always be here. I don't think we have a problem retaining those, But some of the students that we have a hard time reaching with either resources or that have needs, I always worry about whether or not we can keep them, because that's where our ADA bleed off is. And I think that when we start having these programs, these community programs that are inclusive and represent the arts and dancing and all those other things I have no experience with and can barely appreciate myself. Have you ever seen my wife, dude? Anyway, so, touche, Tim. Anyway, I was getting emotional there for the first time in my life. So anyway, at the end of it all, what I'm trying to say is, when we can deliver equity in education, we retain our market share. People feel like they're into something, that they're a part of it, and there's a uniqueness about our community that you can't find over there and over here. And that's the key to keeping our students and making them feel at home and having ADA retention and ultimately less dependence on things we can't control. So read between the lines on that one. That's it for me.
Thank you. And thank you, when you were referring to an old teacher, you went to your left and not to your right.
I'll get to next time.
I don't have a lot this evening, other than the fact Lynn, David, and I attended the Antelope Valley School Boards Association meeting on, oh gosh, when was that? Tuesday? Tuesday. Thank you. Tuesday, and one of the things that they talked about was the Antelope Valley Emergency Council. They had like a panel, but they also showed a Palmdale School District short bus that has monitors and computer capability in some ways to communicate. So, and it's not just for Palmdale. If you had an emergency, that's another resource that you have that you could reach out. Unless Palmdale's having the same emergency, then they probably wouldn't share it. But so it's for everyone to use. Okay. So I know that you had a commitment with your family, but you know, it'd be great for you to see that so that people know that that's available to us. So if you guys have an emergency at your schools or something, they can send that out to you, flooding, whatever happens. So I'm sure they'll talk about it at your meeting, so thank you. I know that you have been attending those, so I appreciate that. So, and thanks to Lynn, because it was a late evening, so thank you, Lynn, for coming to that as well. So that's really all I have for this evening, so.
Thank you.
Oh, one thing I do have for you. Remember we did talk about, they also, I'll pull it out of my purse, they have the Raptor, Raptor screen. And the screening where you do your driver's license, so they did have that set up.
Okay.
And I did tell you that one of my concerns, because I went to another school district and the really small font and gray, not black ink, wouldn't do any good. So this is what that looks like.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
So you have been with the district a long time, and this is your photo when you started. That's nice.
That's my driver's license. If you're gonna wear these tags, people, and you belong to our district, get a really nice driver's license picture because you're gonna be wearing it. So do your hair and makeup when you go to get your.
Mine's really young, so I look really good on it.
Yes. So you guys can see what that looks like. So that is what the tag looks like. So I did bring one for you.
Thank you, that's great.
Thanks.
But you're supposed to turn those in when you leave campus, Miss Jensen.
No, it was a sample. They had a little. It was about safety.
All right. Similar to Ms. Jensen going to the Antelope Valley School Board Association meeting, this board made it a goal for us to branch out and go to different association meetings to try to bring best practices back and learn from our peers. So my part of that, if you'll recall from 2 or 3 meetings ago, was to go to the LA County School Board Association meeting because I worked down in the city anyway. So I did that the first time. It was very rough. That's what I was going to report out a couple weeks ago. And they had a guest speaker. And the guest speaker is an instructor at USC, and she also works with the FBI and major national law enforcement organizations. And her specialty is she's been doing extensive research on human trafficking. And before I went to this, you know, I had this vision of human trafficking because it's in the news a lot lately, being associated with maybe people entering the country or being smuggled into the country and human trafficking. The vast majority of human trafficking in the United States is fellow Americans. And the human trafficking is really, it's young girls. And it has to do with forced prostitution. and it's a huge epidemic. And so this discussion was on human trafficking, recognizing it's there, trying to protect our students, making them aware of it, as well as something called sextortion. So human trafficking is typically when the girls, and it's mostly with girls, are reeled in by these predators over the internet. It's usually over the internet because you know, people reach each other and then they establish these relationships with vulnerable young people. Parents aren't always there because it's happening right there on their computers. And the kids and phones are reeled in, mostly the girls, into the human trafficking. And it starts as simple as, so if there's something actionable out of this, if you have a child, there shouldn't be a picture on their phone or on their computer that they wouldn't want the world to see. Even if it's just like partially naked. Because what happens is, you know everybody gets hacked, the picture gets hacked, and then with one picture, they're bribed, because they're shamed, into the next picture, and the next picture. And now at this point, there's a collection of pictures, and the child is pretty much owned, because they're young, and they're vulnerable, and they're embarrassed, and if they don't approach their parents, and their parents don't help pull them out of this, they're owned by that person, and it goes downhill. Now, you say, well, how frequent is this? Apparently, we associate gangs in the United States with selling drugs. Well, no, their number one business is now human trafficking. And so that's how frequent this is. And it's really all been enabled by the bad side of the internet and the connectedness and the phones. And for the boys, it's called sextortion. They're not actually physically trafficked, they're reeled in the same way, and now there's pictures of them or something similar, and they're committing crimes on behalf of people because they're trapped. So what's actionable about this? There are organizations starting to put together materials that's so new to roll out to schools for things like assemblies, and teacher training, professional development, to try to recognize it and start training kids to be aware of it. And we're a small district. It's hard for us to have a specialist, but this district, Walnut Valley, is putting together a program right now, and I'll just give you that card. And when it's ready, they said, of course, they'd share it with us. And so that's something we can do, is just keep aware of what materials are out there and bring them in. And as parents or teachers, it really is to drive home how important it is to be just mindful and careful of their computer use and their phone use, specifically pictures. That's the entrance mechanism. And I tell you, it was a very, very, very rough evening because the numbers are not small. They're not small at all. And once these people are trapped, they're not home anymore. Parents can't find them, and they're effectively slaves. And they're even advertised in the paper and on the internet. New girl in town. And they actually go city to city, and it's almost like a concert tour, except it's a young girl. So anyhow, makes me want to go back to the next meeting, which will be in another month. It was very rough. So that's what we can do, is talk to our kids and maybe keep our lookout for materials. That's all I had for board member comments. Next up.
I think we're ready with the video.
Oh, is to watch the long-awaited video.
Radio was good.
Yeah.
Good morning to all. I hope it is a great day in every way. I am Cat in the Hat, as you can see, and right next to me is Yolanda, who we'd all like to be.
I like to read funny books because they make me laugh.
Congratulations, today is your day. You're off to great places. You're off and away.
I love reading because it is very fun.
Remain humble. The rabbit felt mighty, important that day, on top of the hill, in the sun where he lay. He felt so important up there on that hill that he started in bragging, as animals will, from the big brag.
You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself in know. You are the guy who'll decide where you go.
Oh, the places you'll go.
With your head full of brains and your shoes full of feet, you're too smart to go down any not so smart street.
I would not like them here or there. I would not like them anywhere. I do not like the names in him. I do not like them, Sam I am.
Would you like them in a house? Would you like them with a mouse?
I do not like them in a house. I do not like them with a mouse. I do not like them here or there. I do not like them anywhere. I do not like the names in him. I do not like them, Sam I am.
May not find any that you wanna go down. In that case, of course, you'll head straight out of town. It's open there in the wide open air.
I like reading because of how it's a great time killer. I'll be on page 10 and then I'll go to page 100 something. It'll be 2 hours later than it was before.
Here are some who like to run. They run for fun in the hot, hot sun. Oh my, oh me, oh my, oh me, oh my. What a lot of things go on.
I love reading because when you read, it takes you into another world and the characters are your friends.
You have brains in your head. You have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose.
And now, to celebrate all of you and thank you and recognize you for all of your efforts at school, because we know that you want to be cool and stay in school.
Embrace your strengths. Shout loud. I'm lucky to be what I am. Thank goodness I'm not just a clam or a ham or a dusty old jar of sour gooseberry jam. I am what I am. That's a great thing to be. Be who you are today, Vasquez.
The Outsiders, which is part of our theme that we always talk about, our stay gold moments. So as the poem at the end, I think Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost. 1, 2, 3, 4. How many winners left at the door? Don't put a frown, come on down. Pick your book, the next one's on the hook.
When things start to happen, don't worry, don't stew. Just go right along, you'll start happening too.
I started enjoying reading when I was around 4th grade when I found a really good series of books and it really captured me in.
Oh, the places you go. Oh, the places you go. The places you go.
Why do you think it's important for kids to read?
It's important for kids to read because it can give you a good vocabulary and help you to learn more about the world and explore it through different ways.
On your way up, you'll be seeing great sights. You'll join the high flyers. You fly to the high heights, and you won't lag behind, 'cause you have the speed. You pass the whole game, and you'll soon take the lead. Wherever you fly, you'll be best of the best. Wherever you go, you will top all the rest.
I like to encourage kids to read every day. Suddenly, you are just jumping from your reality of Acton AADUSD into wherever the book takes you, and you're no longer having to get a ride from mom or dad to go someplace. You're off at Hogwarts or you're in the Hunger Games running for your life. It's as if you are actually alive in another place. That's the fun of reading.
So that's all we have for today. Everyone be safe and have a great day. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right
and
on,
right on Mustang.
With benefit flapping once more, you ride high, ready for anything under the sky. Will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed. 98 3/4% guarantee. Oh, again. So get on your way. All the places you go. All the places you go.
Great job. Please thank your students too. And it was just to let you know, when we were visiting the school sites, teachers are called up as well. So we go to the school site, the secretaries, the office staff, everybody's, it's a really team effort because they have the fishbowl ready with the kids' names and ID numbers so we can raffle them off the books. And then you can hear them cheering from the neighboring classroom. So when we call off, Miss Miller's class, we have student number 51, and then, the whole class is clapping, and the student comes down, and then we send somebody to cover the class, so when, okay, now we're gonna pick a teacher from room 13, Miss So-and-so, the class claps, we send somebody on to cover, that teacher comes up on live TV, they're seen getting their gift card to Barnes & Noble, so it's a team effort. Thank you, everybody, and a good time by all, I think. So, second annual one, next year, we'll improve Mr. King's poetry skills, and have something up my sleeve for next year, so thank you. Thanks for being patient with the video.
Our pleasure. 9.01 is the minutes of the March 14th regular board meeting. Oh, actually, 9 is the consent agenda, and the consent agenda will include the minutes of the March 14th board meeting. It'll include the personnel action report, and it'll include the warrant register, and it will include a universal gift form and a gift from Mr. Bose to the school, to Vasquez High School. And so those 4 things are part of the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to bring it in?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay. All right. Is there any, well, I'll start with the board discussion unless Mr. King wants to talk about it, just to recognize Mr. Bose for the gift to the
Sure.
to phase 3. Would you go ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. So what was in the plans, the original plans, was to take a triple basin stainless steel sink from the culinary classroom and move that into the concession stand, the new concession stand on the field. Mr. Bose has suggested that we not disturb the culinary classroom, and that he would donate, and that's what you're approving tonight. He is donating a 3-basin deep well stainless steel sink to the phase 3 completion of the project. For him, it feels like that's a tradition that he's done at the completion of any phase, so we appreciate his thoughtfulness on that.
We do, yes. Okay, any other discussion on
the only other comment on the personnel action report, I just want to point out that Ms. Chris Wheeler is an elementary school teacher. She has an effective retirement date on here. You see June 7, 2019, so just want to acknowledge her for her service to the school district and point that out for the public. And there's one correction, you see an asterisk for Mr. Newton. We have mistakenly put on there March 30th. It's the same math teacher, it's not 2 math teachers. So resigning June 30th, 2000.
All right, call the question?
Aye.
Aye. It's a 5-0-0. Okay, that brings us to section 10 of the agenda. 10.1 is an MOU between the California State what is CSEA?
California School Employees Association.
That's it. And AADUSD Classified School Employees Professional Block Grant. And motion to move that in?
Second.
Tim and Ed. Okay, you want to briefly describe it before we take it?
Sure. These are professional development funds for our classified employees, correct, Dr. Cooper? And the purpose of this particular MOU is just to state that the district is interested in those funds, that you're approving those funds, that will will conduct professional development dedicated to classified employees, but they've also asked that they be consulted. Even though the district ultimately decides what PD will take place, that we consult with them and confer them to make sure it's something that's going to be meaningful.
Well, so for me, that sounds like a terrific idea. People who are being trained have some idea of what they think they need, so.
Absolutely.
That's terrific. Any other comments before we call the question?
Well, I just note that there was the accommodation, so that if the development happens, that there's no job, they're paid regardless of it's not, when it talks about their compensation at their appropriate rate during any mandatory voluntary professional development. So I just wanted to note that that's in there.
Okay. All right, call the question?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks. That's a 5-0-0. Now we're on to item 11.1, the AADUSD Local Control and Accountability Plan. It's our LCAP for 2017 and 18 and 19 and 20, and it's the annual update of that document. I'll make a motion to open it. This is a discussion, there'll be no vote, okay. And Ed Porter has seconded the opening.
So I just want to thank Dr. Cooper and team for working so hard on this and putting this together for the board and for the public. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Cooper.
For the purpose of this presentation, it will help for you to have that summary alongside of this so that you can follow along. We'll be speaking to the PowerPoint, and we'll be going over several different data sources as we go through our presentation. You know that this is going to be a presentation on the LCAP. It's something that we have to review annually, and we have put together a summary of goals, our target groups, and actions. So the presentation,
Quick question. Because you made reference to something that you thought would be helpful, we have it next to us as we go through the presentation. In all of our papers, were we given something?
It's on your attachment, so if you look at, if you click on 11.1.
Yep. It's on our.
The number one attachment says 18-19 summary for annual update.
Thank you.
So we'll be talking about plan goals, expected outcomes, actions, services, budgeted expenditures, and you have to know that those things they must be copied each year verbatim. We had a discussion about that. So if you see a lot of information that you already know about, it's because you've received it several times before. So with that.
Okay, as Dr. Cooper shared, this is our third year of a 3-year static plan. Next year, the year after this one that we're going to be working on now, we will come into a new plan. So you will hear your goals are going to sound really familiar. We can adjust our actions based on what our outcomes are, and this is at this point we're looking at our annual outcomes to inform what we're going to do for the coming year. So again, you've seen this before, but just a reminder that we used to have funding on the left with a big pot of money and many, many little pots of money when we had categorical funding. Districts and people around the state advocated to do something that was different because oftentimes, especially in a small district, you might get a tiny, tiny pot of money that you really couldn't implement a program in. So now we have LCFF, which has a big pot of money and then some smaller pots of money. Supplemental funding, some districts, not us, get concentration grants, and then a few remaining pots of money for categoricals. So this is what drives the LCAP. The LCAP is a required piece of legislation to partner with the funding. So it's basically, we explain how we're going to spend the money. So next slide. Local control funding formula, these are the factors, and again, in a minute we'll get into the actual plan piece, but this is what drives our decision. The money is just a vehicle to be able to do what we want to do with our actions. So we have a per student base amount, we have adjustments for grade level, so K3 has we used to call it class size reduction, and now we call it grade span augmentation. We do recognize that oftentimes younger children require some additional resources. 9th through 12th graders also require some additional resources. We also get some additional money for demographics, low income, English learner, or foster youth. Those are referred to as unduplicated students in the sense of you can actually be one or all three of those things for some students, which does count for extra money, but only one time, even if you're all three. of those criteria. So that does give us some extra money. This is how the funding comes in that gives us the ability to do what we're going to talk about in just a minute. So next slide. So required elements of the LCAP plan include stakeholder engagement. That's the beginning of what we're doing today. We always believe that we need to bring the information to board first, seek your input, make any adjustments that we need to do, and then we're going to take it out to our stakeholders. We're going to present this exact same information to our booster clubs, our staff, our bargaining units, the community members, our parent groups. And so we're going to share this information to have stakeholders engaged in knowing what we've accomplished this year first, and then get input as to what changes we might make for the next year. What we're talking about are our goals, measurable outcomes, so we know, did we accomplish it? We're not just putting the finger in the wind, we're actually looking at data to see, did we accomplish what we want to? We're looking at progress indicators, which are defined mostly by the state. They tell us which data we're to use to see if we met our objectives. And then actions, services, and expenditures. So again, that's where the vehicle starts moving into action. So what our actions and services are and how we're going to spend our available funding. Next slide. So stakeholder engagement, as I mentioned, we're going to consult with employees, and the wording is pretty specific. Consult means that we're going to ask for input. We're going to seek input from all of these groups, but then as we come together to see what our funds are able to support and if they align with the district priorities, especially the board's goals and strategic plan, we're going to move forward with actually putting that funding into the plan itself with the actions that are outcomes. So we need to present those plans to parents, the advisory groups, and boards of trustees. So in the plan, there are 8 state priorities. I'm not going to read them all to you. You can read for yourself, but there are 8 state priorities. The way our plan is currently written, each goal, for the most part, addresses 1 or perhaps 2 of them. Sometimes there's overlap, but just so you're aware, as we're continuing to move forward and think about our LCAP going forward, you can have a certain goal address more than one of the state priorities. And oftentimes it makes sense to do that. So we do need to cover all of those, but how you do it, and if there's overlap, only one goal for one state priority, that's okay, or you can combine them. So we must address each of these things in your LCAP. So goals and progress indicators, Grace, you want me to cover that, or sorry? Okay, I'll continue. So each LCAP has to include the district's goals for each of these. So again, we have 7 goals in our LCAP. The goals are written on a progress indicator, and they address either all students, which means all the students in that grade level, that school, or it can also include and must include the numerically significant subgroups. So in our district with our demographics, we have socioeconomically disadvantaged, which in this district is defined, in most districts in fact, is defined as students who are eligible for free or reduced lunch, English learners, foster youth and homeless youth, students with disabilities, so any student who has an IEP, and white and Hispanic. We do have other students with other ethnic backgrounds or other criteria, but these are the ones that have enough students to actually trigger the requirement for us to actually report on it and write goals for them. Next. The priorities and indicators, some of them are measured by the state, actually more and more of them are. Those are the ones that are the state indicators, so things such as pupil achievement, pupil engagement, course access, and other pupil outcomes. So things like academics are measured by our CASP scores, our test scores, our English learner indicators, so our LPAC and our state testing for English learners, and our students in grades 3 through 8 when they take the state testing. Pupil engagement, chronic absenteeism is measured now automatically. This district used to have to report on it by counting ourselves and then reporting to county office, and then it transferred to the state. But as more and more online has come through our state database called CalPads, it goes directly there. So all of these things are the state indicators and are not defined by us. Local indicators such as like the perception about school, those are done locally and then reported out by the district. So, I think that's the part.
I'd like to share out the first goal that was written. The first goal is to increase grade level proficiency by 2% in the core content areas, those being ELA, math, history, and science. The measurable outcomes that were met were for the RFEP group, those are the reclassified fluent English proficient student group on the CASP and ELA. In math, outcomes were met for all students, including student groups of socioeconomically disadvantaged, ELs, students with disabilities, Hispanic and white groups. Outcomes were not met for the RFEP or the student groups. CASP results were not available because it was just a field test for 2017-18. So those will be available for us for this coming school year. For goal 2, the goal was to increase the percentage of EL learners who are reclassified as fluent English proficient criteria by the district criteria. That outcome was not met at this time for 2017-18. And goal 3 was to decrease chronic absenteeism and truancy by 2% annually, as well as suspension rates by 0.5%, and maintain expulsion rates. Measurable outcomes were met except for absenteeism and student suspension.
All right, goal 4 is about parent involvement. Provide connections between the community and schools to foster investment in education and provide meaningful communication. Ensure that parents, students, and teachers feel that our schools are providing a safe and positive environment. And the measurable would it would be increasing, quote, strongly agree or disagree, or sorry, strongly agree/agree, end quote, responses by 2% annually. Unfortunately, we have not met that goal in the past 2 years. As we move forward for the next, the measurable outcome will be determined on the LCAP survey for this upcoming year, 18-19, and it has to be, and it will be the same that's been developed and that we've used for the past 2 years. Next slide, please. Thank you. Goal number 5, to ensure that secondary students are on track to graduate from high school, college and career ready, and students experience academic progress and success in a broad course of study, and that they will increase 1% annually on those key indicators as provided on the dashboard. The measurable outcomes have not been met for high school graduation rates, the Cal State's UC eligibility, college readiness, and quote, all students, that's the overall group. SWD and SED for CASP and ELA and CASP Math. Those are all acronyms for the multiple assessments that we have. Measurable outcomes have been met for AP exam passage at 3+ and math college readiness. Next slide. Goal number 6 is nice and simple, maintaining the appropriate assignment of teachers who are fully credentialed in the subject areas of the pupils they are teaching, and we have met that goal. Next slide, goal 7, and that the district will continue to provide a safe, secure, and drug-free learning environment for our students. Students will have access to the standards aligned material in a safe, secure, and aesthetically pleasing learning environment with 2% increases in stakeholder satisfaction annually. Those outcomes were met for facilities as they are in good prepared and access to instructional materials. And there'll be additional outcomes to be determined on the LCAP survey that will be going out in April for 2018-2019. Then at the bottom, we have the detailed summary of goals, actions, and outcomes from LCAP 2018, and that was the additional exhibit that we just spoke to. And then that is it.
So in closing, know that this is the way that we share our expected outcomes, needs, actions, or performance data, which is guided to help us use our LCFF funding. Do you have the, thank you. So we're ready for any questions that you may have.
I have a comment. Oh, okay. I was just going to say, in general, I think it's important people understand, and myself too, that there's a smattering of achieved objectives and of not achieved objectives. And that's because the objectives, they're hard to achieve. It's 2% year-over-year improvement and things like this. The graduation rate, 1% year-over-year. Okay, well, if you actually look at Vasquez High School's graduation rate, it's very, very high to begin with. So adding 1% year-over-year says that we'd be at like 100% in 2 years. And so, you know, there's laws of diminishing returns on some of these metrics. So I think that we need to understand that when we talk about some of the goals that are met and some of the goals that aren't, because they're expressly designed to be difficult, and you do get to laws of diminishing returns. As far as the AP exam passing, I'm ecstatic about that, because that is a measure of you know, comparison nationwide, and so it's a measure of our ability to offer those courses, but also for students to actually take them and take the exams. And that means we're motivating students to push themselves and they're achieving. So I'm happy about that one particularly, which is not saying the others aren't also super important, but that's just my feedback. I think it's important to realize we're looking for 2% year over year in many categories, and it's hard to do over and over again. The only people that seem to do it is Wall Street, who demands increased returns year over year, and as an employee you feel that because they're feeding you and not raising your salaries. So and that was my comments. Other board members?
I have a couple questions. Like, so I'm looking at the one for ELA for English Language Arts, and for all students, the SED and EL, they all were really down. So that, do we have any, they didn't level off, they really dropped. So I want to comment on the math. The math has gone up because math is one that's been a challenge for us, but now it seems like it's shifted over on the other side, and now English language seems to be having a challenge as they're not, I don't know.
It is an important group. If you turn to page 3 of 12, you'll see the proposed changes in action services, and it talks about our emphasis that's going to be placed on our English language learners this year. We have teams that have been developed to look at integrated English language development. We have a plan coming up where they will do a master plan EL session in April. Also, our teams are going to have an opportunity to be trained further, our teacher teams and administrator teams. We have a plan in place that they will be trained further on designated services for our English language learners also. So we do have things proposed. We do have a plan on how we're going to increase our percentages.
So when it gets to the PD, some of it's going to be targeting some of these shortcuts.
Say that one more time.
When we get to choosing the professional development, it's going to be addressing some of these issues that this is resulting in, right?
That's correct.
I have to jump in. First of all, there's a new curriculum. It's normal to see a little bit of drop when you have new curriculum. However, when we talk about PD, remember the year's almost over.
Yes, ma'am.
So this plan, I mean, we're going to be taking the tests soon. So I'm happy to hear you're talking about designated ELD for what people, there's integrated, meaning you're doing skills throughout the day. There's designated 30 minutes a day. And when I joined the board, I did say that was important to me, and I don't think it was happening the way it needs to be happening. The other thing I'd like to see is we're talking about a percentage, we're talking about 2%. It's normal for everyone to say 2% growth, LCAP. Pretty much everyone says 2%. But what I'm going to ask you to do, this is just data, this is something that happens, this is old data, this happened last year. You know, we're working on this year. What I would like to see is when we talk about subgroups, our schools are small enough, we need to know who those kids are. We're not talking about thousands of kids, we're talking about a few kids. So when we're talking about 2% of kids reclassifying, we should know exactly who those kids are by name. We should know everything about them. So I'm going to challenge our staff to, I would like to see who we're going to really work with, what our goal is. We need to have targeted goals of these students and what we're going to do. Because our district isn't very big. So when we're talking about 2% of a subgroup, then we should be able to meet that goal. And that's going to happen with targeted instruction, that's going to happen with designated ELD, and having learning targets for our students. So when we're talking about professional development, we can train everybody, but we really have to know who these kids are by name, by data, know what their needs are, and we should be able to address what they need. So that's what I'm gonna encourage us to really work on so that we can meet our students' needs. Because when they're getting into high school, we need to get these kids reclassified before they get to middle school. I don't want kids in ELD instead of being into some other kind of class that they can enjoy. And to be in here and to be able to use 2 languages is a plus. It's not a deficit. It's something that's going to help them.
Yes.
But I want these kids, I want them reclassified in the elementary, so when they get to middle school, they can take extra classes and not be into designated ELD. So what does that look like? I think we need to start encouraging them, and when we come back to school next year, really hit this hard. So when our EL students are in, 4th and 5th grade, we need to get them moving out so that when they get to Dr. Bice, we have a tiny group that's in ELD. So that should be our big push.
Yes, ma'am.
So I know you guys are working on that, but it's just important that it's just not a percentage. It's kids. I want to know them by name.
I have one follow-up pick. I'm like Mike, I'm really excited about the AP passage. I know my whole years of being Vasquez, that was always an issue. Why can't we pass these AP exams? And, okay, so now we're there. But then when I look on the back and it said we are falling, we didn't meet the CSU eligibility. Is that because we don't have courses available for them, or are we missing something? Or are we offering them everything that they need to be ready?
So if you, are we looking at?
I see CSU eligibility.
That's not
We
right.
expected 34, we got 20%. But they weren't eligible for that. Is that because they're missing a course? We're not getting them in the right courses? They're not taking that additional year of math? What is it that we might be missing? And this is something I think is going to be addressed with the counselors, that they're going to, now that we have the full-time counselors, they're going to be able to focus on this, correct?
Yes.
So go ahead. Well, one thing that I can add related to that is the way the metrics are designed by the state, it doesn't actually recognize any student. For example, we may have students, and this is across the state, there may be students who choose to go into vocational education, and so when counselors advise them to take certain courses to be UC or CSU eligible, they say, that's not my plan. I plan to be, some sort of a trade,
right,
and go to a trade school. And so they graduate, but they don't have UC or CSU, and that is by their own choice and design, but that doesn't mean they're not successful. However, the way the metric is designed, it doesn't recognize, students who are intentionally college bound. It makes an assumption that every child will go to college at some point in time. So it's not to make an excuse for it, but it is something that, especially in areas where there are a lot of students who may want to go into a trade as opposed to a college type plan, it does not account for that.
And I have no objection to a student saying, I want to be an engineer, I want to be a carpenter, I want to go out into business, that's perfectly acceptable to me, that we're preparing them to be viable contributors to their community. So in other words, we're getting penalized if we have a bunch of students that say, well, I'm not going to go to the University of California, so I'm not going to take that extra science or that math or that foreign language, but I'm still going to graduate, and I'm going to graduate with a 4.0, and I'm going to do all these things. Okay, so, because I remember years ago when there was back in 2008, 9, everybody's going to take this, and boy, we just took a dive because they forced kids into classes they weren't prepared for, and we had a hard time recovering from that. And so I understand your explanation. I just want to make sure we're giving them every opportunity to do what they want to do to be successful members of the community. We want to, career says career ready. Doesn't mean maybe they're not going to go to University of California, but they're going to be ready for a career, go out and get their hands dirty.
Right, and the way they define college and career ready is basically
is those two.
Right, and not to belittle the state's measurement. I don't want to represent that we don't think that that's a good aspiration, but I will tell you, conversations with the counselors and, and the principal that was there at the time this data represented, there are students who said, we really appreciate the support and we're super glad, but there are students who said, I plan to be a contractor, I plan to go directly into the insurance field with my father, different things like that.
And we need to address those and be sure they're prepared to do that successfully.
Yeah,
And
so
to
just,
do
yeah,
that.
so to some degree, for our purposes, you know, it's not gonna change that data and we're gonna continue to work on it, but we need to take qualitative. That's where like all our meetings and the stakeholder, you know, if we have families that, you know, if we know that we're getting kids into careers that they're choosing, not to think that's not important or discount it, but we can still say, okay, we're doing a good job with those kids.
We're gonna keep the bar set high, so hey, I know you're doing that, but take this math anyway, because it's gonna help you, and then maybe they will go to UC or go to Cal State University.
Because we do have a lot of college entrance type classes, and some of them are actually fairly lowly, you know, small class sizes, but we offer them anyhow.
Yes, and congratulations to staff and the students for working hard on AP. That's exceptional news. I like that. That's really
Thank you. And you asked a question in regards to the counselors. There is a tracking program that they're working with. They're working with our students. We have experienced counselors, and they're doing a bang-up job in my opinion, and they'll just keep chipping away at it.
Just thought overnight, turn the switch on thing. It's something we're gonna have to work on over time, but keep up the good job. Thank you.
Okay, my turn?
Yes.
Tess, come on down. Tess, I wanna call attention to you. I'm so glad that you are at our elementary school, because we scored a lot of issues here, and I think we end up, you know, doing regional comparison and norms, and we find a way to make ourselves feel good about the numbers. I spoke a little bit earlier about inclusion and some things like that. And to cut to the chase, we're talking about the Title I kids. I talked in my board member comments that we're not talking about the kid that's gonna be here and stay here and why. We're talking about the kids that drop through the cracks. And I do not, for the life of me, being a government employee, enjoy when I see these exposés on television where you got people going home in city trucks and hanging out at the bar, and all of a sudden it turns into, oh, I wasn't supervised, and then somebody at him or their level suddenly becomes the victim of something because somebody just won't engage. I think we know we're talking about ELD. I think we know that ELD is a federally mandated program. I think that ELD is supposed to be in place. I think we know that it is not. I think that we know that if you don't deal with ELD at kindergarten, at first grade, at second grade, it suddenly gets dropped into Dr. Bice's lap, and then we have things, I got a few of them written down here. Misdiagnosed SPED because a kid can't communicate, so he's behind or she is behind. So then they're in a special ed class, and we've got severe behaviors over here, and then we've got misdiagnosed, and we've got behavioral issues all jammed into a room. Meet me at Meadowlark sometime if you want to see that live. I think that some people are misidentified when they look at something like my last name and sound it out, suddenly that becomes a reading disability or dyslexia. I don't think that that's always what it appears to be. And then we have behavioral issues when people are excluded out of the normal performing group and feel that they have to be a joker or a tough guy, so they're not labeled as stupid. So by the time that we get to Giselle Weiss and those kids and up into high school, that's where our ADA bleed off is. And that's where we lose people, and that's where we become dependent on superficial funding sources that will not last. I'm expecting that. We've got somebody here that's been talking about ELD from the first time they've been here. I will expect that the superintendent will have measurable rollout of ELD this fall, and I will expect that the staff and teachers are fully engaged and accountable. I will not have people checking out and then dumping it on the principal so we can all do some fluff numbers here. We need to get to the kids when they enter into our school. They are our kids. This is a federally mandated program. Let's get it enrolled or rolled out. And I'm so glad that you two especially are in the driver's seat right now, especially you, Tess. I have a great deal of faith in you that you can do this, because I know that in your experience as a teacher, you have done this before yourself.
Absolutely,
Thank
yes.
you.
And it is an area of focus for us for for next year. There's a lot of.
Believe me, it's an area of
things that we're
focus for him too.
Absolutely, for.
Okay, I'm not angry, I'm very supportive of where this needs to go. I can stick $4,000 into a $20 car and the most it'll be worth is 30 at the end.
But it definitely is a focus, and we do have a lot of
Thank you.
things in the pipeline that we do plan to implement. I've talked a little bit with Kelly about some of my plans, and we share at cabinet often about things that we will be doing.
I appreciate you. I know you guys are doing a great job, so we're excited to see what's coming. So thank you. Thanks for taking care of our kids.
Our pleasure. We appreciate this.
Anything else, guys?
I just want to thank Dr. Cooper and Dr. Weiss, and Ms. Toledo, and Ms. David for your efforts on this. Dan is here in spirit. We
Yes.
have a lot of discussions in cabinet regarding our planning on instruction, social, emotional welfare of our students, and so on. But I also want to thank the board because to have that support to move forward, it's much appreciated. And the fact that you see that as a priority is very important for the school district, so thank you.
No, thanks for doing such a great job. I love the way you guys put things together. It's complicated. If people are in education, you guys make it very easy to understand. So thanks to your whole team.
I really think staff is the one bringing this forward to us, so
Yeah,
you can see bits and pieces of it in here. And you all aren't gonna go off and say, well, you know, I was inherited this and all that kind of thing. This is a progression of things. People keep rolling out curriculum. There's a lot, so you're very gracious about this, but it's not like we're preaching to the choir, and you know that. Thank you.
I don't want to make it look like we brought it out. You guys,
No.
you guys have had these discussions. So
Yeah, if we're dependent on what I bring out, we're all in trouble.
So
All
thank you.
right. Okay, I think we're through with that guy. Item 12, business and financial. Let's see, what is the actual text? It's a resolution, 1819.16, regarding Proposition 39, LED lighting conversion and LED lighting conversion contract. Do I have a motion to move it in?
So moved.
Okay.
And before I turn it over to Ms. Davis, just a couple comments on Proposition 39, because I'm not sure everybody understands. Proposition 39 is energy funds that are available to the school district. And I want to thank Ms. David. I also want to thank Ernesto, I think he's here tonight. There he is. Mr. Mora and also Mr. Mike Arona. The whole team has really worked towards making those funds available.
Tube style bulbs, and also it's going to remove the ballasts so that we don't constantly have to replace them. The ballast costs almost $25 every time they go out and have to be replaced. So Mr. Mora agreed that that would actually be the best way to do it so that we don't have to deal with the ballasts anymore, but we also get the energy savings. So we did do an RFP, we put it out, and the RFP is based on best value. Because, and we work with the attorney to assure that we are able to do it as a best value instead of lowest cost. This happens to be the lowest cost, but also the best value, taking into consideration the timeline of the project, the experience of the contractor, and the cost as well. So we've been working with the attorney. We had two proposals submitted to us, and the one that is actually the best value is lighting labor source, and the contract bid came in at $94,011. So we would like to have your approval on that resolution and move forward with the contract. The timeline would be, we're hoping that we can get the contract and everything in place to be able to do the project during spring break at both Meadowlark and High Desert School, all the interior lights. And if for some reason all the materials aren't here, we'll do it right after school gets out, but we're hoping to do it then so that we can get it done. So we'll have all new lighting that meets the specifications as if you were building a new school with LED lighting.
So these are state dollars expressly for these?
Correct, you cannot use it for anything other than energy projects.
And the project meets the state's objective of return on investment. Since they're spending their money, they want to make sure that we save
enough money to pay for the project.
Yeah, and just to clarify, this is partnered with the replacement of the entire scope of the Prop 39 project is partnered with the scope of 8 replacement air conditioning and heating units at Meadowlark. But when we put the RFPs out at the same time, but when we put the RFP out for the air conditioning, we got only one proposal, and it was late and it didn't meet the criteria of the specs of the equipment. So we rejected that and we're gonna put it back out. And so we'll bring that back later, but this one actually did meet it and came in a little bit below the amount of funding we have available, so we were pleased with that.
Any other questions?
I think it's a go, because I always hated that humming that was going on in my classroom. Those ballasts are a pain in the door. I'd call her Nesto Mini, hey, this light's buzzing, come fix it, it's crazy. So I think it's a good job, that's good.
I want to take this opportunity, and this stems back to the last meeting, the facilities maintenance plan presentation. I'm glad to see you're here, Mr. Mora. What I've seen over the last year is that there's an increased competence in the facilities, both in the way things are prioritized, planned, and projects are completed. I see that there's less of a dependence certainly on regulatory agencies coming in here and telling us what to do. I very much appreciate that. And I'm seeing that there's reduced costs in oversight also related to consultants, and that's both compliments to you and your teams. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, call the question.
Aye.
Aye. So 5-0-0. Thank you. Let's see, 12.2, which is a bond audit, and this will be in action. Somebody wanna, I'll move in 12.2.
Second.
Tim Jorgensen. Ms. David? Ms. David, yeah.
Okay, every year that we have a bond project and bond funds still available, we do need to conduct an audit specifically on Fund 21, which is our bond funds. At the end of 2018, we actually had $25, well actually 2017, we had $25 left in Fund 21. So we were required to conduct the audit on that. We used the $25 on some materials for Vasquez, which closed out the entire amount of funds available from the bond in that year. We did not have any findings. We used the money as specified in bond language. We did not have any problems with the way the money was accounted for, and so we had a clean audit. I did not ask the auditors to come out to present the report because of the size of it. They will be here doing our regular audit tomorrow, but for the bond audit, we had a clean audit. It's closed out, and this will actually completely close that fund, and we will no longer need to do a bond audit. So
it's my understanding that next year we won't spend several $100s to have an auditor look at a fund balance of $25.
That would be correct.
Even more progress, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, ready? Call the question?
Aye.
Thanks.
Give me a minute before you go.
You wanna take a break?
Please, I need to hear Tim.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Let's take a moment. You know what? As long as we're taking a moment. We're stopping at 10. We're trying to be faithful to that. It really shouldn't be a problem, but let's keep going. People work. Okay, so we're on 12.03, which is titled Vasquez High School Branding. It's a discussion. Does somebody want to make a motion to bring in this discussion?
So,
Somebody want a second?
I'll second.
Was that you, Tim?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so it's open for discussion.
So let me just make an introductory comment, and then Ms. David and I have had some discussion on to prepare a little bit for tonight. But I'd like to start with Mr. Jorgensen, just kind of like Mr. Fallscraft did, and ask for the facilities plan to be agendized, or the facilities projections and so on. Same thing here. So Mr. Jorgensen, why don't you kind of start us out and kind of lead us into the discussion?
Okay, well, I think it's best to recount a little bit of history first. So what I've done is that first I make no bones about it, that I think tradition and culture in our schools is important. at each one of our campus sites, and then soon to be here at Acton School. What we create, what the students create, what the parents and the volunteers over the years create is important, and I think it needs to be cherished and remembered. Years ago, back in 2015, I recall being at a fall coaches meeting with our principal DeVoe, and at that meeting, it was the first indication that there was going to be a change in the Mustang logo. I was head football coach, and I was athletic director, and all the other fall coaches were sitting there in the meeting in the conference room. And I remember clarifying with Mr. DeVoe. I said, Mr. DeVoe, I said, you realize that I think that's a trademark symbol. No, it's not. And I said, yeah, that's a Boise State Bronco symbol. I can recognize it. I know it is. And so we went around the room, and then we carried all the business of the day. And then before the meeting was over again, I said, I really think that you need to think about that. And I says, and why are we changing this? And his response to me, he says, I think we need an update. There was no conversation with staff, with students, with ASB. It was just something that popped up. So I voiced my objection at the time. We went away, everybody went back and did their business, and as athletic director, I had multiple meetings with him again regarding athletics. And at a later meeting he came to me and he said, Tim, are you gonna put this logo on your uniforms? And I said, no, I'm not. And he goes, well, why? And I said, we just finished an $11,000 fundraising and bought a 5-year program with our uniforms. And he said, well, what about your helmets? And I said, well, the helmets have already been recertified, and they already have our logo embedded on them. They put them on, they take them off every year, every helmet's recertified. So I said no. So we went the whole year, and we had multiple conversations, and later on, about January, early spring, this is now the spring of 16, he came back to me again, and he says, well, I think we're gonna buy you new helmets next year. And I said, we don't need new helmets. We recycle our helmets. We recert them, and we have ones that get old, and then we have our decals placed on them so we don't have to do all this work. I was still objecting to the change, and I kept, why are we making this change? Came into the end of the 16 football season, we had our uniforms in, we had our helmets on our Rydels with our traditional logo that we'd had for 14 years. There had been other sports that had changed and started to embed the Bronco logo on it, not the Mustang logo. And then I had another conversation with Mr. DeVoe as athletic director again before I resigned as athletic director, and I said, Ty, you realize this is a trademark symbol? He said, no, Tim, they don't care about a small high school in California. Well, I knew that not to be true because I had contacted Boise State License online, and I looked on their online page, and they had all of the symbols that are everything associated with Boise State, and they're trademarked, and there were multiple images of the ones that he was proposing to put on the gym floor and to put on our football helmets and to use for our athletics. I went back into him and I brought it up to him again. I said, you need to check this website out because this website has your image on it saying that it's a trademark of Boise State. And we had disagreements there, we walked away and did it, and then my last year of coaching was 16. And as soon as I concluded 16, they had a new athletic director, Miss Nahar, and she sent me a picture and she said, Tim, here is your new helmets for next year, starting the 16-17 season. And I'm going, and it was a new helmet from Schutt, which was not Rydell, which had an expenditure starting off at $10,000 for new. I said, we don't need new helmets, and it had that logo on it. She sent it to me by email. I said, you realize, I said, Stephanie, you know this is a trademark. It's not ours, we can't use this. No, the vendor says it's okay. I said, well, the vendor doesn't have anything to say about this. And so I was only head coach then, I wasn't athletic director. I took that logo and I forwarded it to the license department at Boise State, and I said, my athletic director is recommending and proposing this logo for my helmet. May I use it? And I was told, no, you'll be getting a letter. And Okay, so that was in 16. That was in the spring of 16, like right before the school was getting ready to May or June, somewhere around there. I didn't say anything. I told her, I said, okay, fine. I said, it's not me. I said, you need to talk to my principal, Mr. DeVoe. It's like, it's coming from the athletic department at that point. As we went down on there, last week, when we had this up, I had a discussion with Mike, and I requested that we have an agendized item because I talked to Mr. Andrus. I had forwarded the representations of our logo to the principal of Vasquez High School, Mr. Andrus. Here's the one that we have. Currently, there are 5 logos on the Vasquez campus. We have our original one from 1997 on the sign by the freeway. There's a new one by the Escondido. There's the one on the building. There's the one on the gym floor. There's the one on football. They're all over the place. So there is no branding. But the one that we've had for 14 years was changed in 2002 because everybody said, well, that's the Denver Broncos logo. Yes, it has similarities. Mojave High School is known as the Mustangs. They used the same identical Denver Bronco logo, only color change, because their school colors are red. Principal Pinkston back in 2003, when I was ASB director, said, Tim, we need to kind of like clean this up and so that we're not like the Broncos. What can we do? And I said, well, I don't know, let's talk, we have an art department. Let's talk to the art department. Let's talk to ASB. So what we did is we made a very subtle change to the main to make it unique to Vasquez. We're the only one that has it. We're the only one that uses it. So it has the head of the Denver Broncos, but it's our Mustang because we put a gold mane on it that's different from everybody else. I went to Robin Rizzo over at Rizzo's Embroidery and I said, well, our students are going to want this. Is this something you can do? She says, yeah. So she formulated a patch that we see on many of our student athletes' letter jackets. This last week, I called Boise State Monday and I talked to Mr. Spencer Yon, spelled J-A-H-N, and I told him who I was, that I have retired. I used to be the athletic director and coach, and I said at some point back in 15, 16, I was in touch with your office, and I said I had asked if this logo was okay for my school to use on my football helmets, and I was told at the time no, and I was told at the time that a letter was going to be sent. Do you know if a letter was sent? And he said, just a moment. He looked on, he says, yes, I see that a letter was sent to Principal DeVoe November of 16, cease and desist. You may not use our logo. Now, nobody knows. I have never seen the letter. Doesn't surprise me that nobody has seen the letter. But at this point, I would like to have Larry or staff or something contact Mr. Johns to make sure that we're not in any violation. But more importantly, I think it's important that we send a message to our students. We're an institution of learning. We don't just bend the rules because we want to change them. There's character, integrity, tradition, and culture that many, many students, parents, community members, businesses have donated and created the opportunities at Vasquez, and I think we need to protect that.
Mike, I'm not comfortable with staff rolling out anything just right now. Let's get our comments out of the way first. Ed?
I'm good, thank you.
I'm next.
Thank you. Would you like to go?
Please. Okay, I beat my head over this 2.5 years ago. I had people advocating the minute I hit the board. I made movies, Hardy Boys movies, called The Case of the Missing Mustang. There was this idea that the trophies that, when was the high school built, or the first?
91.
Okay, are there any trophies around here from 1991? Does anyone know of a trophy from 1991, 92, 93, 94, anything like that?
There were trophies. Yes.
Well, no, I'm not asking if there were trophies. I was 16 years old at one time, and I'm not 16 anymore. Are there any here now that anyone knows of?
I can respond. Let me make one comment.
No, please. It's my floor now. I just asked a question. Can somebody show me a trophy from 1999 or anything thereabouts of that vantage?
I heard that they disappeared, that they did exist.
Okay, so can anyone confirm or deny what Lillian just said? Are there any of those trophies around? Has anyone seen one? What is the oldest trophy you've seen?
I'm sure there are probably some, and if we reached people via maybe Facebook, I'm sure if we asked them for some, that there would be some that still have them.
No,
You're not talking about individual,
okay,
you're talking
okay.
about school trophies.
Okay, here we go. In 1978, I was the debate and forensic champion of my school. There was a trophy that goes back to 1902 that has my name on it, and believe you me, they know where it's at. It's in the trophy case. So it sounds to me like if we don't have a trophy case that represents the first few years of our high school being unified into this district, that we were either really bad and never even won any place and had no trophy, or somebody pitched the trophies.
Maybe it was
pitched the
on purpose.
trophies.
Wow, brilliant. So, now we're at today, okay? I will say this, some people who have never had power before don't know what to do with it when they get it. But I don't have a time machine to go back 2 and 3 years. This is, and I've ranted about this before, this is just yet another example of our need of an athletic director that is beyond figuring out whose logo we're going to use this week, and figures out that maybe I should not just worry about the sport I run, but maybe I should go to Miss Toledo over here or Dr. Bice and stop the helicoptering of certain people influencing the entire sports program to whatever it is they want to focus on today, and grow this up a little bit. And this is just another example. So now, Boise State, I would expect a letter from their attorney anytime, which will force us into an expenditure that I couldn't make 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago when I went on this board. When I, at work, make decisions about playgrounds, I look at the surfacing of the playground. If the surfacing does not pass compaction tests, it is time to change it. If a kid falls and hurts themselves, the city I work for is at risk. So when I perform that evaluation, I don't say I'm gonna put $600,000 worth of playground surfacing in today and then change the playground equipment 3 years from now because, well, it needs to be changed now. It's about planning, it's about organization, it's about organizational competence and specialty in what you're doing. And not to pick you two out again back there, but this is just another example of the improvements that we've needed in our facility planning and those types of things. So, Tim, I understand your frustration, very much so. But until we figure out when is the floor scheduled to be its first major sanding, can anyone tell me that?
Yeah, so it's about, Ernesto, and Lynn, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be about another 8 years of life on that floor, as I understand it.
They recommend to redo the whole floor in 10 years, when it's 10 years old.
Which would be another 8 years.
Okay,
But
so.
the clear coating's wearing off.
Hang on.
But to do the whole floor,
Back up. I got the floor line. So what I'm
Trying
asking,
to help return it to you.
what I'm asking is this: when is the next time? To Jackie's point, I think anyone who has any level of eyesight can go in and see that that floor is wearing now. And in defense, I don't want somebody to run down the road and say, well, because there was some dance process or something. There's a floor covering that's used routinely. Has anyone in this room been to an event where the floor is completely covered, including the Young Americans thing? So no one is trashing the floor. I don't see people spilling food all over the floor. So normal routine maintenance says that that floor is ready to be sanded when?
8 years, 8 more years.
And so, tell me what happens to the life of the floor when we sand it prematurely to pull up a logo.
Come on up to the microphone.
If you don't know the answer, just tell me, I don't know. The last thing I want to do is put you on the spot.
basically every time you resurface the whole floor,
yes,
you're taking off an actual big chunk of.
And that's probably done with a laser
Cutting the
grader to
life
tell
of
you,
the actual
I got
floor.
some wows over here, and if this needs to come up, then this needs to come down.
Yes.
When do you think the painting on the wall will need to take place?
when it's 10 years old, that's when you have to redo the whole floor to 100%.
So short of somebody going in there and throwing zip strip on there or eggs at the wall, it's a little bit of time before the things are done. Before we're ready to paint again. Okay, so now we're at, okay guys, now help me out. What else is on the building that would need to be changed in a logo change?
Nothing.
The main office in front, there's signs that would need to be changed and
But I'm talking about major things that would involve the equivalent of sanding the floor.
I believe that there are 2 big signs on the front of the school that, depending on how they were framed, might require approval from DSA because of their being anchored.
I don't see any of the people you're talking about here today that made some of these decisions. You're welcome. You're welcome. No problem. So now we're here today. I'm as frustrated as you are. I hope I don't go back to my school and find out my 1902 trophy is gone because somebody felt that they should wipe away everything before I created my whatever it was. But I think the bigger issue we have here is, are there anything, where does this list go to from here, from the gym floor? What do we start talking about? Do we start talking about uniforms? Do we start talking about, what's the scope of this change? Help me understand this.
Well, it would really depend on direction from the board, so if you were gonna have another agenda item perhaps down the road where you were gonna discuss, staff would like you to make a progressive change, we'd like you to make no change, we'd like you to make an immediate change. So if you wanted to make an immediate change, that would certainly impact social media, it would impact the clothing attire, the gym floor, the paint, and the signage.
Not to be rude or offensive, but again, just another problem dropped in your lap to fix, you all too. So at the end of the day, Mr. Mora, my apologies that you have advanced yourself to the point where you can finally be rewarded for misdirection that was given to you before. But we are at a reality point where I'm sitting here harping about ELD being rolled out. I'm talking about inclusion, I'm talking about kids, and now our focus is back to somebody deciding that they were gonna put some football thing. And I mean, I could understand it if we had some relationship with this college that were using their logo and they were taking our kids or had a scout out here, at least some relationship, but I don't understand that relationship to be. So my expectation is if this is going to be discussed intelligently, that it overlaps with the scope of the rollout, which departments are affected, what the budget looks like, and where it would drop into the regular maintenance routine and not, and come at it from an approach. But short of us getting a letter from Boise State tomorrow morning, I'm already looking for money, and if you don't think so, read the LA Times today. It's kind of painting the picture out for you a little bit, okay? I'm done, thank you, Mike.
I just want to touch on a couple things that he didn't clarify. You were asking about trophies. I says, you can go back and look at the trophy case in the gym, and they started in 2000, because when I got there in 2000, I said, where's all our trophies? I was athletic director and I was ASB advisor, and they were in a dumpster. They said, well, we got rid of them. And I go, how does this happen? So I made it a point that when we were there, we created perpetual trophies for all of the sports, everything that was happening, so we were recreating the culture that was there. When it comes to uniforms, those are things that are done annually, with the exception of football, where we have a logo. Those are expensive. Everybody else buys new uniforms every year. So you can change your logo every year, and that's what happened. So it's not a big impact on uniforms.
All right, so my turn. There's clearly passion around this. There was probably passion 3 years ago. There's passion now. There might be similar passion 3 years from now or 5 years from now.
There will be.
All I'll say is, there's a lot of history there, but where we are today. And to talk about spending money to change a floor in a gym that's 2 years old, I will never get behind. It's not, for me, the best use of taxpayer money. And then when you talk about adding insult to injury, because now the floor doesn't match the signage that's on a 3-year-old building, because the building of the school is 1 year older than the gym, I'm not going there either. There are educational things that we can do with our money, as opposed to reversing a decision, right or wrong, that may have been made 3 years ago. And so I'm not going to get behind any discussion of redoing things, spending money that's only been spent 2 years ago. Now, that's not to say that some people don't, feel for the old one versus the new one. I understand that the decision was made, and I think there's better resources that we can spend money on going forward. Educational program, or even if you want to stick in athletics, well, let's talk about putting that money in almost 40-year-old field at High Desert School so that kids there can do athletics and come up to Vasquez athletics. Also, besides the best use of money, the truth is this whole thing over time will probably get less sensitive. The kids at that school, this is the logo they know. And so, the decision was made. I'm not going to say whether it's right or wrong or indifferent, but we are where we are today. And not a good use, in my opinion, of money, and I'm not going to suggest that we pursue this any further from my end of it. Do you have anything else you want to add, or Ms. Jensen, we haven't heard
Well,
from
I
you?
think I'm a person that has a different, who's on the trophy in 2010?
Huh?
Who's on the trophy on 2000 for the football team?
On 2000?
2000.
I don't know the names right
It
off
would
the-
be Kyle Jensen probably.
Well, Kyle Jensen was there on the basketball.
So, I appreciate all that you've done because, my son was a very good athlete and he's all over the place on those trophies, so I appreciate that. With that being said, it's a sensitive subject. I think where it went wrong was no one asked the kids probably. And when we have high school kids, they can make those kind of decisions. And so I think that's maybe where it went wrong. And I remember how hard you guys worked on that logo. There was a lot of thought and a lot of stuff that went with that, and that came from a time that we didn't have sports, and our kids were getting the snot beat out of them, and we put some darn good football teams on that field. So I can see where your passion and your love for the kids, and that field is named after you for a reason. But with that being said, it's an unfortunate situation, and to spend a lot of money, and we're part of that right on. See how we could do that. So how do we move forward? I think that's what we need to come to a consensus where we do that. So, that's where, I agree with you with the tradition. I think it was great times, and I appreciate that. But we can't, the high school's been built, the floor is down.
And now there's sadly, there's new traditions. Yeah. And so if you reverse now the kids that have this tradition, so you can't win. Yeah. You just can't.
But I do think that you
Ed, did you have anything? Ed, did you have anything?
Thank you for asking. I'm not in support of changing the floor at this point.
I would make a note, and I really don't mean this in a bad way. Lawyers can discuss whether one logo is too close to another. The logo's there. I don't think any board member should be contacting other bodies and saying, hey, is it okay we did this 3 years after we did it, or even at the time we did it? I mean, that's like me calling up DSA or somebody else and saying, oh, why don't you come down and check out my project? So I don't think that's actually a good thing that we're doing, because it's inviting a problem. Now, if the problem shows up, well, you look at them. I mean, Kayla and I just looked at it. Some people will say it's close, some people will say it's far. But you don't go out there and invite a problem. And so I think that I would suggest to my other board members that we not pursue inviting problems, whether or not it fits our agenda or our agenda from 3 years ago. I mean, I'm really kind of disappointed in that myself. Now, so I think that we've heard 4 members here are not interested in pursuing.
Well, I want to clarify here.
So
I did not go out and instigate anything on this. I clarified something that was done 3 years ago. The letter was written in 16. I didn't ask for the letter.
No, I know, but you did contact
You
them and ask
implied
for it.
that I'm
Did
going
you
out
contact-
causing problems, and
did-
that's not
so
the
let
deal.
me clarify. 'cause
Well,
maybe
wait a minute, I'm still talking.
Did you contact them?
I contacted them because it showed up on the board, and the superintendent said, Tim, you're gonna be doing this, so I wanted to get my homework in order.
Oh, all
And
right.
I clarified that a letter was sent to principal DeVoe, and you, I think, were on the board, as well as Ed was on the board, that approved this process for him to do that. So you're not gonna throw me under the bus and say that I'm causing problems.
I doubt very much that either Ed Porter or Mike were shown interest.
I get that.
And
And I'm not
I
trying
get
to
that.
throw you under the bus, Tim, I'm saying that I just don't think it's a good idea for a board member to potentially pick a scab someplace. I mean, I wouldn't do that, I wouldn't follow up someone.
I've been accused of calling DSA, so I mean, you got a ways to go.
Anyway, so let's let Miss Holland be heard. She's turned in a card. You'll have 3 minutes. It is not back and forth, and it's 3 minutes, and then we're gonna move on. So far, we're at 4 are not interested in pursuing this, and 1 who is. Your time starts, Ms. Holland. Please state your name for the record.
Jean Holland, and you guys obviously have never been in a trademark court, because you're talking about money. That's mega bucks that this school will have to pay because we violated somebody's trademark. And there's already been a letter written to our school district telling us to stop. And now you're saying you don't want to follow the law. You're all worried about spending money to make our school legally correct. And Mr. Jorgensen did the right thing to make sure that our school was legal. You do not use somebody else's trademark for whatever reason. And it's not you or anybody else except the person that has that trademark to decide if it is the trademark. If they say that's our trademark, then all of you are responsible financially. I disagree with the ones up here that are saying, let's not bother making this right. And if you do continue to say that, believe me, I'll be the one calling Boise and letting them know they need to bring down here somebody because we're violating their trademark. And I will make it known in the Country Journal with a letter stating that our board feels that we should risk a trademark war because they don't want to mess up something that has been done wrong.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to make a suggestion to the board. My thought would be, let staff look into this. Let us talk to our own legal department. Let us look into trademark law, copyright law, that sort of thing, and get back to the board.
My comment, what I'm interested in, and what I said at the very beginning before, was I have ELD that's not rolled out, that's a federal requirement. And everybody wonders why our scores are low, and why we have dyslexia and reading disabilities, and all those types of things. So if I'm interested in a lawsuit, it's that one. Read between the lines on the warrant register. When you see an attorney name that you don't recognize, do the math, people. Before you started, I asked that you not speak because you don't know where you're headed to. My questions to you as staff were, when is that floor ready to be sanded? When are those types of things? And in an intelligent environment where there is planning and no ego and no threats, you tell me that floor is ready to be sanded, that wall is ready to be painted. Did you not tell us last time that you have a maintenance tool from a regulatory agency that you use to rate your facilities for the SARC report? Is that true? Yes.
The buffer?
Yes. So, when it comes time where they tell you that the paint is falling off your wall, you don't let that happen. So my support lies in, if staff looks at the facility maintenance plan that we just heard for the first time the last meeting since I've been on the board for 2.5 years, that when it comes time that you would replace the floor, when you do those types of things, sand the floor, and those things are dropped in, then the wise people say, we discuss branding opportunity when that happens. If a lawyer comes walking in here and we're ordered to be compliant, that's what we do. But I'm not gonna sit here and be blamed for somebody's ego that were 4 years before I even sat on this board. And I understand your frustrations as a former employee, believe me, I do. But at the end of the day, all I am interested in hearing is how a corrective plan that would brand a new logo be rolled into the maintenance plan. That's all I'm interested in hearing. Thank you.
I think we'll move on.
So I just want to clarify, so is there consensus on the staff following through to clarify the legal question?
I think there's no harm in that, so.
Okay.
Not at all.
Because nobody here is suggesting, no one here is suggesting that we disobey the law. What we're suggesting, or I'm suggesting, is that these things are subjective, and just because one person says that's too close, what is too close? And so if you wanna go look at it and a reasonable observer say it's too close, then we'll have a different or I would be open to a different conversation. My objection is to spend money out of cycle, as Mr. Fallsgraf says, that could be spent on educational purposes unless absolutely necessary. So, you have my consensus to just feel that out. Is there a consensus generally at the table?
Now, again, I would add to that, if you are looking at projects that are painting projects or those types of things, then you would make a note in your file that when this comes forward, it is time to review the branding, just like it would be time to review a playground surfacing if the correlation of the equipment overlaps with the surfacing by 2 or 3 years. We're looking for budgetary efficiencies.
And I know it's been said, but I just want to extend from the staff's point of view to Mr. Jorgensen that I absolutely have empathy. I can't imagine being an AD for that many years. You and I have had a number of private conversations before you were on the board. I do appreciate where you're coming from, and your heart is always with the kids, which I appreciate very much.
My personal has nothing to do with this. I'm looking out for the branding and the development and the growth. We losing students, we need them to come back. If we have a brand that everybody knows about, the quality that we present, the image that we present, the students will come back, our ADA will go up, our respect will go up, and they will no longer refer to us as just that small little district. We can't go out and try to put these little splashes out there to try to make it work. And I'm not saying go out there tomorrow and close the gym and paint. I've never suggested that.
Okay.
I was suggesting that we do it under a maintenance thing, but I want to get clarification on this letter. I don't want to get a bill saying you're in violation. And that letter's from 16, that's not from now, that's over 2 years ago.
We'll do that homework.
Okay.
We'll do that.
14.01 calendar. April 6th is a special board meeting for governance workshop. April 11th is a board meeting here, regular time. Spring break is April 22nd to 26th. And May 9th, we will have a regular board meeting again here. Item 15, closed session. Nothing to report out from closed session.
Mr. Fox, just one future agenda.
Oh, I skipped one. My apologies. So nothing to report out on closed session. We'll go back to 13, future agenda items. Evaluation of future district projects, possibly talk about a bond, a CFW presentation, and public hearings for Valiant Charter and Method Charter School.
Okay, so under future agenda items for Valiant Method, those are April 11th. Both hearings are that evening. In addition to that is the Inspire staff recommendation, which will come forward on April 11th.
And 2 public hearings.
2 hearings and 1
staff report
Action.
for action.
And then on top of that, on the other piece you mentioned, evaluation of future district projects, bond, so on. I have a meeting with CFW John Green next week. We'd like to have him come back to the board and present, probably in May. And we're probably on a good timeline now to start talking about the bond for November 2020. Last go around was a little bit of a rush, I think, and we gave it our best effort, but we've had a debrief meeting. Ms. Jennings, Lee's here, Jennings, and with that committee, we had some debriefing conversation along with Ms. David, and so we think we're on a good track for the timing of it to start now, so we'll bring that forward in May to the board to have some conversation about it. And then April 11th also we'll bring forward Vivert Trinan Day, a dollar amount not to exceed regarding the consulting contract with that financial firm. So we'll bring that forward on April 11th also.
Okay. We're up to item 16, adjournment at 9:46. A motion to close the meeting. Kelly Jensen. I just put you down as the motion. I thought you meant.
Oh, I'm sorry. No,
we have a quick go back.
On closed session.
Did you graduate 2004?
So we gotta go back to closed session. We have to report on Mr. Fox. There was one unanimous vote, and there's an employee ID number that can just be read out under closed session items.
Oh, so why don't you hand me that because we can't text me that.
So it's on your.
Okay. I'm sorry, folks. Okay, let's come. Okay, so there is a report out from closed session. My apologies. It's on item B, public employee discussion, discipline, dismissal, and release. Public employee number MR 6511392. We had a unanimous vote for a disciplinary procedure.
In favor of staff recommendation.
In favor of staff recommendation. All right, I apologize for that oversight.
Motion and second for that? Oh, no, it was unanimous. Okay, so.
Oh, okay.
Just get a motion and.
So a motion for that report.
For that report, yeah.
Who would make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Ed Porter
I'll second.
and Mike, Kelly Jensen seconds that motion. Call the question. Aye, so it's a unanimous vote.
Thanks,
on that
board.
report. 9:48. Motion to close was already made by Kelly. Ms. Jensen, I'll second that.
She already voted.
And Shell already voted. Let's call the question. Aye. Okay.